Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting of East Cambs District Council. There's some of you who are maybe new to this building, and we'd like to say welcome. And just to let you know, we will, depending on how the meeting is running, I would normally try and have a comfort break at about 2 hours, if that's where we are. And if I can also point out to you that if you go out of this door here and turn left, you'll find the toilets, and you'll find the same ones if you go out of that one there, and on the right. So please just go if you feel the need for. Will you please turn off your mobile phones if you have them with you, and make sure they don't go off. And would you please address, if you ask questions, please will you run the conversation through me as best as possible. You may well be, if you're speaking, you may be asked by members various questions. And just so you know, my name is Bill Hunt and I'm the chairman. And my colleagues here, including the vice chair, Mark, all along here are members. Members will debate the applications and will make a decision. Over here, we've got officers of the council, including our legal officer, who will put us right if we do anything that we shouldn't do. So, in the first place, I'd like to ask Patrick Adams just to give a fire safety warning.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. If the fire alarm does sound, please can you leave by the nearest exit, which is here and the one behind me. Please do not use the lifts, and please can you congregate in the front of the building in the car park. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go on to apologies and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Christine Ambrose-Smith, Councillor Martin Goodall, Councillor Ross Trent, and Councillor Christine Whelan. Councillor Julia Huffer is subbing for Councillor Ambrose-Smith, Councillor Keith Horgan is subbing for Councillor Goodall, and Councillor Lee Denny is subbing for Councillor Trent.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, have any of you got declarations of interest? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Kennet is in my ward, but I have never been involved in any discussions at parish council meetings about agenda item number 5, and I think I approached the agenda item with a completely open mind.
So you'll be taking a full part in the proceedings. Thank you. Will you make a note of that, Patrick, please? Now, minutes. You've all read, I hope, the minutes of the 3rd of September. And is there any reason why I shouldn't sign them as being a correct record after this meeting? Okay. We've got 5 new members of staff, and Ashley, Yoli, Rachel, Sophia and Kevin are here. The first 4 are permanent officers, and the Kevin, our legal representative, is here to fill in a gap which is vacant at the moment. So we now then move on to, and I wish our newcomers a welcome. I think we run generally speaking, a small, friendly council, and you'll be very welcome. And if you make any mistakes, you won't be the first person in this organisation to do that. So we now move on to number 5. And so can I have the officer presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Okay. Item 5 is the proposed development for up to 13 dwellings to include affordable housing and access. And I apologise, I think your reports read affordable contribution, and it's not, it's affordable housing. The site is at Henson's Depot in Kennet, and I'll be presenting this application for an outline permission. The proposal is for an outline with only access being proposed at this stage through Station Road. Here you have Station Road. From the image you can see a bit better, Station Road along this line I'm pointing, Kennet train station, and the A14 just north of the site as well. This is River Kennet, and Bury Road further south of the site, which is here. The proposal includes a indicative site layout, just to show us roughly how the houses could be distributed, but this is not for approval at this stage. Only the access point, which is in fact existing, and will need to be improved to accommodate the number of houses when it's defined through layout and further reserve matters applications if the outline permission is granted. These are photos of the site you visited this morning. The site was used as cement aggregates production and hasn't been used since 2020 according to the submission. And as we could see from images, these are area views from Google Street View from 2018 at the one on top and 2023 in the bottom. The main considerations were principle of development, landscape and character, residential amenity, up to the point that we can discuss as an outline, access and highways as well. In terms of the principle, we have considered that the site is wholly within the development envelope. This is the boundary of the district, and the previous use needs to be considered against policy M1 and would be protected. However, we consider that the site was vacant since 2020 and the residential use is more compatible with the residential surrounding, as we've seen this morning on the site visit. We are considering that significant environmental and community benefits could be achieved, especially in terms of noise and dust from the aggregates production, pending, of course, details of layout, appearance, scale, and landscape. This is because the site will be viewed. This is a view from Bury Road, further south. You can see the site as it's surrounded by open countryside. This is the line of River Kennet vegetation. And these are the backs of the houses along Station Road. So you'd be able to see, it will be integrating that line of residential use. But of course, we would be interested in seeing how the landscape can buffer any different context from this view that we have on the screen at the moment. In terms of landscape and character, as I mentioned, layout, appearance, and landscape are not for approval at this stage, but we will be considering a buffer around the site to mitigate impact on open countryside, or the views from the open countryside. We also will be requesting that sustainable drainage systems are part of the buffer, as well as open space, which needs to be provided for future residents. All these aspects will be considered when reserve matters come in the future. In terms of residential amenity, what we've considered at this stage was basically potential impact from noise and air pollution coming from the A14, the proximity with the road. And this have been, the assessment of these topics will be secured by condition as recommended, which will have to accompany any reserve matters in the future. Depending on the orientation and the buffering with the landscaping as well, you can have different types of impacts, and that's what we're going to be assessing. But looking at the indicative layout at this stage, we think rear gardens can be achieved, and of course we'll be looking at different housing mix. There'll be a number of 4 beds, 1 beds. That's something that will be assessed, and it will have an impact on the amount of open space in the area. In terms of access and highways, the Highways Authority have asked us to secure a condition to improve the access to accommodate future development, which again will depend on the number of units achieved at reserve matter stage. But the access point was accepted by the authority and by us in the recommendation. And when layout comes forward at reserve matters, the applicants will have to observe Waste and Highways comments in relation to the design of the access route itself and spaces for turning, collection points for bins, dragging distances, etc. That's something that we will be looking when we assess layout as well. My recommendation is that members approve the application considering the provision of affordable housing, which will be at 40%, compliant with the local plan. The fact that the site is not effectively used for employment in the past 5 years, and potential environmental and community benefits from more compatible use with the surrounding areas. These, of course, pending details. The development could be better integrated comparing to the previous employment use. A section 106 will have to be signed, will have to be entered into to secure affordable housing provision, Will Bean's contribution, and other financial contribution towards education and libraries as well. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
So it's a conclusion. Okay. Now we have speakers, but I've got a list of objectors, applicants, neighbours, but no names. Is anyone speaking at all? No? Pardon?
Very good.
No, we now need to have, I think since we have no speakers at all, we have questions to the officer. Members, away we go.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. In regards to the comments made by the ECDC Trees team, has it been addressed?
We are of the view that they have to be assessed during the reserve matters applications. So we do think there is potential for buffering the open views with the landscape buffer around the site.
Thank you. And in regards to the strategy for condition 4, it mentions the energy and sustainability strategy. Did it tell you what it will be, or is that to the reserve matters as well? In condition 4, in regards to the strategy for condition 4, did it tell you what they plan to do with the strategy?
No, what we are requesting with the recommended condition 4 is that if this outline permission is approved, a condition will be included so an energy and sustainability strategy is presented at reserve matters. So we're not approving one at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair. The officer has told us that at this stage there is a limited access down that one road. And I thought, looking at the plans that we had up on the wall, it would have been possible to have had a run through this development and in and out of the Kennet Road. So you had on the screen, if you would like to go back to that. That's it. On the far right-hand side, there seemed to me to be an access at present from that side towards the road. Could you clarify, one, whether or not there is an access on that side, and two, could it be used?
If there is one formally, it's not part of the red boundary, so it's not considered. The only access that's being considered at this moment is the one from Station Road directly. So in order for it to be considered, you'd have to be part of the red line boundary, which the applicant has chosen not to include.
Could that be considered when the full planning application is submitted to us?
Simple answer to that is no. You can't consider something outside of a red line. It would need to be a new full.
Councillor Trapp.
A number of questions. One is the access road to it at the moment. How wide is it at present?
I won't be able to give you in meters without measuring.
Or will it be widened?
It has potential to be widened, but the local highways authority did not specify which improvements to it should be. So if you look at condition 18, that is the highest requirement. On page 36, apologies. Condition 17,
Yeah.
sorry, prior to first occupation, there should be sufficient space provided within the site to enable vehicles to enter, turn and leave the site in forward gear and to park clear of the public highway. The area shall be levelled, surfaced and drained and thereafter retained for that specific use. So at this stage, we don't know if the access route, the entire access route would be offered for adoption for highways. So what we secured at this moment is that there would be enough.
The problem is not, I don't think two vehicles can pass on that road at the moment. I don't think along that. So can we... Oh, sorry. Might did that turn off? Who did it?
These fingers, John.
It's these things, all right. So can we, what I'm asking now, technically, can we secure a condition that it's got to be, say, 6 meters wide or whatever throughout the whole thing, so you can get two vehicles going one to the other?
I think the issue that we have now is that at this stage, we don't know exactly how many units there will be on the site. And highways will tell us, well, it depends on the traffic that's going to be generated. So
Right.
at the moment, what highways has said is there is sufficient space for the 13 units to access, enter and exit the site safely, depending on the layout, the design of the street inside as well.
Yes, but the actual entrance to it, the drive to it, not actually on the site, but the entrance to it, is not very wide at the moment. That's what I'm saying, and this one has a bin lorry there as well. The bin lorry will be able to go down. No bin lorry and a car will not be able to fit on that driveway.
I'm struggling to think of how we would word a condition is the problem. What we could do is we could put an informative onto any consent, basically saying, as part of your reserved matters, the council expects you to be able to demonstrate that. That's making it clear what we are expecting from an applicant. But to me, I don't know about yourself, Yale, but I'd be struggling to work out wording for a condition that would pass for tests.
And I think I can hear the highways authority saying, well, if it's 5 or 6 meters, we'll only know depending on how many cars will come in and out. And even the housing mix would make a difference on that situation, because if it's a bigger house, you might expect more car parking spaces, for instance.
It's not the car parking spaces. It's actually entrance and exit along that narrow road at the moment. That's the thing. There has to be a condition saying a bin lorry has to go down and be able to reverse around, because would be inconceivable for the bins to be stored somewhere near the main road, just too far away. The bin lorry has to come down. That's one thing. But also, the 2 cars can pass along that. It's wide enough for 2 cars, 2 vehicles to pass along that road. And that's what I'm saying. At the moment, this is actually going to be leading to a logjam, as people try and enter and leave.
If the chair and the councillor accept, we can consult local highways and try to think of a compliance condition, meaning it will have to be implemented in such a way that allows for 2 cars passing, etc.
Thank you.
Now, pending local highways confirmation, please, if that's okay.
Well, yeah. The other question I have, this first came in 2021, and we say the place has not been used for employment or as a business for 5 years. So this application must have come in almost immediately after it ceased being an employment place. So it's remained first of all, why has it remained fallow? Why has it sort of not been determined for such a long time? Is there any reason for this?
Simple answer is no. It's just been an unfortunate application. It's got caught up with a churn of officers. There's no hidden reason as to why this one's been sitting around for so long. It is one which has had some fairly thorny considerations, which, as the officer has presented those to you today, with regards to obviously the fact that our local plan is supportive of keeping industrial uses, and then having to weigh up in the balance whether or not we consider that change to be acceptable. But there's no good reason for why it's been delayed for this period of time, apart from obviously seeking information and getting it through the process.
Because when the application was put in, it had just ceased trading, according to this, because it was 5 years ago. So it was not fallow. I mean, it hasn't been used for employment almost immediately. The planning application came in. So that's a bit of a spurious reason. Say, oh, no one's been employed there for 5 years. When the application came in almost immediately when it ceased being an employment answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd best like to say that I totally agree with Councillor Trapp, and I think there would be the same answer if the application, or whether when you got to reserve matters you ended up thinking there'd be 10 houses. I think the concerns that Councillor Trapp had would still be there, and I also think that the planning manager's comments about how we could just refine the application slightly, I think are spot on. Yes?
Thank you, Chair. I've discussed this very insanely briefly with the legal representative here. We consider that any condition with regards to what we're discussing today would probably sit better on a reserve matters application than it would do for an outline. At outline stage, what we're looking at really is principle. Is everything acceptable in principle? Is the room on the site in principle? Now, clearly, what we will do today is we will minute the conversations that members are having. We will make sure that is done, and I do suggest that we put on, if members are happy, if for someone to propose that we put it on as an informative, which we are able to do when we make a decision, so it is clear to the applicants what members' expectations are and what should be coming forward through a reserved matters. But I would suggest that now is not the time to be putting a specifically worded condition on there. But clearly what we should be doing is making sure that people are aware of what the council is minded to consider when we get such details further down the line. Hopefully that makes sense to members, what I'm trying to say.
It certainly makes sense to me, and I think it is the way forward, and I share your concerns about...
Well, I'm just thinking, if I can butt in.
Please carry on.
If the full planning came back and said, oh, we can only do 5 metres or 4.5 metres, would we then be in a position to say no? Think again. That's what I'm saying, that at that point we might have to be actually saying it is not wide enough for access for 2 vehicles.
Just to answer your question, Councillor Trapp, it will come back to the same thing at any application will come down to, is whether or not we can justify such a position. Now, clearly what we would ask our colleagues at the County Council to do when reserved matters to come in is to assess against manual for streets, for example, the proposed layout and proposed passing spaces, or however they intend to get around this problem. And then it'd be then for members to consider whether or not they agree with that. But if they don't agree with it, then we would have to make sure that we had a justifiable position to be able to take. Like anything, if we're going to refuse to consent on something, we need to be able to justify and evidence why we are making such a decision. Thank you.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. A couple of questions, please, Yole. On the diagram you've got up at this moment in time, the only properties that you've got shown in dark mass colour include the one near the entrance. Can you confirm to me what, if any, role that has got in this application? Because that's an already built, constructed property, and I'm a bit confused that it's the same coloration as the 2Bs.
It is confusing now. Yeah, apologies for that. So this house is not part of the application.
Okay, that's good. Right. Second question I've got is, can you just go forward a couple of slides to the view of the backs? Sorry, just go back to that, the one with the 2 sides. Right. You can see in 2018 that there's quite an extensive tree line or hedgerow to the south of the edge of the site there. You can see in 2023 that that's disappeared. Can you now show the photo from the Berry Road area? My question is, are those trees on there or off there? When was that photo taken?
Off there.
They're off there. So, what are we saying that the view from where this photo was taken would have been either of those trees, we don't know when they were taken out, or of an aggregate ongoing business?
This image is of the same period of this one, this area view.
Right. So,
So
what? So the point I'm trying to get to is, I think we'd all agree that the site at the north, at the top here, you could conclude that that's a good visual buffer from where you were taking that photo that we're going to look at in a second, by simply having a tree line in there, which I would think most people would welcome adjacent to their properties anyway, because that would bring the bird life, make it a much more country feel about it. The second issue I've got is that if that tree line isn't there or wasn't there when this was a thriving business, then the view would have been of an agricultural aggregate, sorry, not an agricultural, an aggregate business, which is, I've been on a few of those, and very productive as they are, they're not the most aesthetically pleasing venues, are they? So I'm just trying to work out what's the better or the worse situation here. And I think what your photos demonstrate is the ease at which the developer here could successfully boundary that site to help with his developments.
Just a couple of points of clarity, Councillor Goldsack. It's not in a conservation area, so we didn't have any ability to stop them from removing those tree lines. Clearly regrettable, and clearly something that even if we would be trying to seek to buffer going forward. Can I bring Kevin in for a second? We've got our tree officer sitting in with us today.
When those trees were removed, I was consulted about it. They were removed not to do with the development, they were removed because they were starting to fall apart. They were a line of conifers, Leylandii, that had got to a stage and they were pulling themselves apart, so they were removed for safety reasons.
I'm trying to get some order here, and also trying to, in fact, we didn't have any speakers. We've put the officers, we've changed some of the normal timetable. I think before we go on to debate, I'd just like to ask if officers have got any comment they would make to members. You don't have to, before we go on to debate. No? So, members, we've now gone on to debate. Well, most of us. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. I was on the planning committee when we were there the last time, and it was a lot bigger and included land that's not included in this. I would be reminded by what the Chair of Planning and what the Head of Planning and what the officer have all said today, that this is a principle application, an application in principle. And I see no reason in principle to agree that we need this fleshed out to see what they're going to bring. And I think that will answer the road width and depth issues, that will answer the number of properties. What we're saying here is in principle, we can agree to up to 13 properties on here, subject to how they're going to be. If they're all half an acre size each, obviously they won't fit, but you know what I'm saying. So my opinion on this is that I would back the officer's opportunity here to recommend for approval. Thank you.
Well, we haven't quite got on to debate, Councillor Goodall.
Debate.
However, we are now on debate. Thank you for leading. Councillor Huffer.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going to be a little bit controversial and completely disagree with both Councillor Trapp and the Chair. This was a business. There were lorries going in and out of that driveway all the time. Cars visiting, lorries going in and out. It was still a single track road. So as long as they make it wide enough or put a passing space in there, I can see no reason at all why we're getting so excited about two cars leaving a potentially quite small development at the same time. That's my first point. The second point is, this is a brownfield site, and much as I would love to see light industry on there to provide jobs for the 500 homes that are going on just up the road, clearly that's not going to happen. To me, this is preferable to building on green land. So in that case, if Councillor Goldsack is not proposing, I am happy to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. If he is proposing, I'm happy to second. Thank you, Chair.
Were you proposing?
I'm very happy to propose and Councillor Huffer's a second.
Okay, well, we've made a note of that, but now we go through the debate. Councillor Lay, is that a hand in the air?
Yes. Brownfield sites, we don't have that many brownfield sites within our local authority. And to build on brownfield sites doesn't seem to me to be a mortal sin. So I would support this application.
Members, away we go. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Yes, I'm in support of the principle of this. I like other members have mentioned, I've got, maybe I slightly disagree with Councillor Huffer, I've got concerns about the access road, about what the tree officers mentioned about landscaping and things like noise and environment. We agree in the principle, and I'm not against the principle at all. I agree with this. I will be supporting the proposal. It just seems that we're leaving, and this is obviously, we can only deal with what application we've got in before us, but the developer seems to be leaving a lot of stuff that's going to have to be done at reserved matters, which we might not necessarily agree with. So that's my only caveat to being happy with it, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking at this, 40% of 13 is 5.2. So this is 5 houses plus almost a quarter. Presumably that would be mitigation in some way or other for if it's really 40%. It looks to me as if the affordable element of this is sort of the semi-detached or terraced houses here in one area, and I don't think that's very good actually. I think one should spread the affordable housing along rather than have a little sort of enclave of affordable housing. So I would say something about that. So yeah, I know, but just misgivings about this, and I think it's a rather hodgepodge thing. I'm not sure about this at all. I'm still wavering. I don't think it's well constructed.
Any more discussions under debate?
Sorry, Chair, I know it's unusual to have a second bite at the cherry, but could I just point out to Councillor Trapp, this is an indicative layout. This is not reserved matters. This is an idea of how it might look. It could come back in with 9. It could come back in with 10. And until we've actually seen the layout at reserved matter stage, I don't think you can reserve judgment on something that is just an indication. We're talking about the principle of development here, not necessarily the minutiae. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you.
All right. Can I-
Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, the other one is its proximity to the A14. I mean, the noise was, I would not like to be living in there. I think there'll be a problem. I know, it will be I think there'll be a problem selling this, but, you know, not my problem. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I think, yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, we have a proposal from Councillor Goldsack, which is very simply, as I understand it, as the officer recommends, and that's been seconded by Councillor Huffer. If I'm right, Councillor Huffer? Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And so that was the first application that was made, where Councillor Goldsack got his stake in the ground first, so we'll have a vote on that in the first place. I have some concerns about the width of the road, as proposed by Councillor Trapp, but I've listened to the arguments in the debate section of this application and decided that I will back the Councillor Goldsack proposal, which we will now go to a vote. So those in favour of... Well, very quickly. Well, yes. Those in favour of putting the responsibility with the officers and trust as well, which we're doing, will you please raise their hands if you're in favour of that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Favour.
Will those who are against that please raise their hands? None? Any abstain? So that is now passed and that application has been successful. Thank you, members. We will now go on to item number 6, and we will start with the officer briefing. Away you go.
Ready to go. Thank you, Chair. Item number 6 is the agrivoltaic scheme with capacity for 49.95 megawatts. For clarity, this is likely to feed between 15,000 and 25,000 households over a year. So we can translate the megawatts capacity there. And the application also includes associated infrastructure, access roads and landscaping on the site at Anchor Lane Farm in Newham Drove, Bowell. This is, sorry, let me just. So this is the site in Redline. A quarter of a mile to the east is the development envelope of Bowell, sort of boundary, if you like. Footpath number 7, it's a public right-of-way, runs along the northern edge of the site, which will be accessed by Newham Drove to the south. These are existing solar farms, which we were able to see in the morning, and this is the site for the Bowell substation, as you also have seen. This is a wider view of the site in context. And This is the general arrangement of the site with ditches running at this part, the PV panels distributed along the layout, and landscape in the surroundings, particularly to the north of the site, where the land along the footpath 7 is slightly elevated, as you could have seen from the site as well. There's another part of the site at this area further southwest. This rectangle here is not part of the application. There is permission for, or decision to grant, my apologies, for a battery storage site. And it's not part of the application. There's no type of energy storage with this application that we are looking at this moment. This is just one of the 3 soft landscape plans which would be approved with the permission, with the application if permission is granted. I won't bother you with all of them, but the specifics about planting will have to be submitted in the future to discharge conditions as if members are minded to approve as recommended. These are a few photos from the landscape and visual impact assessment submitted with the application. These are views from the footpath 7, where we've been to this morning. This is just to show that even in the wider views, you can always see Bowell Station and the pylons, so some sort of infrastructure, energy infrastructure in the context as well, and in more closer views of the site, including. These are views from Newham Drove and Hightown Drove, which is further south. Again, just to show the context of energy infrastructure surrounding the site. The main considerations were the principal, visual impacts, biodiversity net gain, trees and ecology, agricultural land and soil, transport and highways, flood and risk and drainage as well. I've added, a slide on pollution, given further objections that were received in the past few days. The principle itself, the site is outside the development envelope of Burwell. However, there's a presumption in favour of renewable energy, not only from our local plan in policy M6, as well as the national planning policy framework and national policy statements EN1 and EN3, as well as the climate emergency declared by East Cambridgeshire District Council included in 2019, and the urgent need for low carbon energy developments such as this one presented today. There are visual impacts in the landscape character as well. However, especially because the character area, the main character area where it falls is the fenland, which, as you will know, is characterized by organized drainage patterns and less regimented settlements of tree cover. So it is challenging. However, the context of existing solar farms surrounding the site was considered, and there is a recognition that appropriate embedded landscape can help reduce impacts on this site as it has in other sites as well. As I said, soft landscape plans have been reviewed, amended following officers' recommendations and requests, and details of planting species are yet to be submitted, which will be secured by condition if members follow recommendation. One of the benefits of the proposal is that it's estimated to achieve over 222% biodiversity net gain on the site. Given the significance of this amount, we requested that a habitat maintenance and management plan is secured reflecting the BNG metric which had been agreed with officers. This will be secured on a section 106, and the management plan has to be consider the 40 years lifetime of the development and not the 30 years, which is usually required. Given the concerns raised in terms of impact on the Wicken Fen, Ramsar and SAC Triple SI site, we have requested a shadow habitat regulations assessment, which has been submitted throughout the course of the assessment of the application. And these have showed not significant impacts on the Wicken Fen. This has been reviewed by Natural England, and they have accepted the habitat regulations assessment, and East Cambs has issued a draft adoption statement for the HRA. Of course, in the context of the agricultural use of the site, we are looking at policy M6, which requires us to consider the local environment, including soil. We obviously would expect applicants to choose lower quality land for the siting of these developments, which has not been the case. These are classification is 2 and 3 grades, and that's acknowledged in the Soils and Agricultural Land Classification report, which has been submitted with the application. Now, the same report shows that the cumulative impact on best and most versatile land, which is the case, is less than 0.1% in the district. It's quite low because of the amount of good quality land for agriculture that the district has. Nonetheless, we are suggesting that management of agricultural land is secured by condition, and that allows for a better decommissioning and reinstatement, which are also going to be secured by condition if members are minded to grant permission. Just briefly, in terms of pollution, as part of one of the most recent objections, the local flood authority has confirmed that the filter drains and infiltration basins would avoid surface and groundwater pollution. So that satisfied that matter. I'm jumping to the 5th bullet point there, sorry. A GU environmental ground investigation is demonstrated that significant sources of land contamination are unlikely. Our officers have reviewed that as well. Our scientific officer is satisfied that not more information is needed at this stage, despite the applicants suggesting that they can bring forward even more information if required. In terms of noise and dust, as well as glare and light, the impact are not expected to be adverse and significant. In terms of construction, as it's pretty much standard, a construction and environmental management plan is recommended to be secured by condition. This will probably include traffic management plan. That's the suggestion in our report. So the highest authority had asked that we secured a construction traffic management plan, but we can include all in one document, which is the SEMP, as indicated on the slide. The operation of the solar farm is not expected to attract too much vehicle movement. However, the issue is likely to be during construction, hence the SEMP condition as recommended. Some points have been raised in terms of the quality of Neom Drove, and this is expected to be addressed under separate highway legislation, that the same applies to the footpath number 7, which in this case we're just including an informative as suggested by the local highways authority to ensure that the public rights of way remains open during construction and operation of the solar farm. Notwithstanding that, any closure of the footpath would have to be accepted by the county as highways authority under separate highway legislation, just for information. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the areas in high risk of flood, zones 2 and 3, according to the NPPF, this type of development is considered essential infrastructure. There's a low level of presence during operation. Notwithstanding that, an emergency flood plan needs to be secured by condition to treat with the flood an emergency situation in this sense. What we talk about exception test is when we assess and consider the low level of people during operation, if an emergency flood plan is sufficient, and we are of the view that it would be sufficient to accommodate any emergency in that sense. The local flood authority is of the view that development could be managed, I think I mentioned that before, sorry, using shallow filter trenches, so there's no risk in terms of groundwater pollution, which is usually treated with the flood risk and drainage topic as well. My recommendation to conclude is that members approve the application subject to mitigation. We are of the view that no adverse cumulative impact for landscape and character will happen. The temporary loss of agricultural land can be mitigated by soil management and the fan landscaping, as well as the reinstatement of the land post decommissioning in 40 years' time. And considering the significant biodiversity net gains achieved or achievable, a potential immediate grid connection to Bow Station, and the overall national and urgent need for low carbon energy developments. This is subject to conditions on Appendix 1 in your report, as well as the Section 106 agreement to include the habitat management and maintenance plan for 40 years, and other biodiversity net gains aspect which might be required. Very likely all BNG matters will be included in the HMMP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive report. We have a speaker, Claudine Bateman. No, Claudine Bateman. Have we got any letter from her? No, well, in which case we will move to the applicants, which is Graham Thorpe. You have 5 minutes, Graham, and an amber light will come on at 4. And please switch your microphone on. And I assume the gentleman with you is... So it's a pair of you presenting. Okay, thank you. Well, when you're comfortable, away you go.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. My name is Graham Thorpe from PWA Planning. We're part of the NFU group of companies. And I'm here today on behalf of the applicant to speak in support of the officer's recommendation for approval. The application is for a 49.95 megawatt dual-purpose project that is fundamentally aligned with the government's legal commitment under Net Zero 2050 to transition to low-carbon energy and, crucially, delivers significant environmental benefits. The core principle supporting this application is the urgent need for low-carbon energy. The government's position, supported by our own Climate Change SPD, is clear. We must transform our energy system to meet our net zero targets. Sat alongside the previously approved battery storage site, this scheme will make a valuable contribution to that national and local objective. Crucially, this is an agrivoltaic scheme designed for dual use. It is not simply a solar farm. It is a scheme that allows agricultural activity to continue in part, but also allows for the soil to rest and improve. After its temporary 40-year life, the land is returned to an improved state of cultivation. Our proposals include a firm commitment to full site reinstatement, an aftercare, secured by condition, and a Section 106. We understand the concerns raised by the Parish Council, the National Trust and local residents regarding visual impact and amenity, and we have worked closely with planning officers and consultees to actively mitigate these concerns. Considering some of the key matters, in terms of landscape and visual impact, we acknowledge that the scheme will result in some visual change. However, the officer report confirms these impacts are localised and non-significant. Our comprehensive landscaping strategy, discussed with both Wick and Fen and other parties, has been specifically designed to soften the development's edge, ensuring that effects will diminish further over time as the planting matures. Regarding ecological impacts, we recognise the site's location near to Wick and Fen, SSSI and SAC. We've liaised extensively with National Trust and Wick and Fen, and they are happy with the scheme as now presented. Our submitted Habitats Regulations Assessment, the Shadow HRA, has been agreed by Natural England and the Council's ecologists to be adopted, and it concludes there will be no likely significant effect on these sites. In fact, alongside a substantial mitigation and enhancement plan, this scheme delivers a massive ecological biodiversity net gain of 222%. The 10% is the minimum, which is a tangible, measurable enhancement of the site's ecology, which will be secured for 40 years through the legally binding Section 106. On the matter of soils and agricultural land quality, the CAFES officer has assessed the impact on best and most versatile land, as shown on the slide. Given the temporary and agrivoltaic nature of the scheme, they accept that development is unlikely to lead to significant permanent loss of BMV land. The solar panels are secured to the ground with limited soil disturbance and can be removed, with no permanent loss of agricultural land quality to occur. Indeed, we anticipate an improvement in the soil over this time due to it being able to rest. Conditions are proposed to safeguard soil resources and agricultural land, ensuring its reinstatement and restoration, and the applicant is committed to these. Environmental Health are satisfied with our noise impact assessment, which confirms no adverse impact on residential amenity, and subsequent conditions are in place to control construction times and limit operational noise. Whilst the site is in flood zone 2 and 3, the flood risk assessment has been reviewed and accepted by the Environment Agency, and a full emergency flood plan will be required and approved prior to the commencement of development. In terms of highway safety, the Highway Authority have no objections subject to the agreement of the CTMP. For any short-term impact on the public right-of-way, the standard procedure would be to apply for a temporary closure of any route affected prior to works commencing. We do not expect the Drove to be closed for more than 2 weeks maximum, and the applicant is committed to improvements to Newnham Drove post-construction, providing better access for emergency and local vehicles, including our Wick and Fen friends. In conclusion, the planning balance here is clear. The significant benefits of a major contribution to low carbon energy delivery and outstanding biodiversity net gain presented by this scheme fundamentally outweigh any temporary and localised adverse impacts. Any minor effect on landscape, ecology and amenity are non-significant and can be mitigated by robust conditions, significant enhancement, a comprehensive landscape strategy and a long-term commitment to environmental improvement. We ask that you endorse the officer's planning assessment and approve the application subject to the conditions and the Section 106. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Would you just sit there, and members, now is the away we go. You're first.
Thank you, Chair. These low-carbon energy schemes, I always find them fascinating. Where will you be getting your solar panels from? China? What is their lifespan? 10, 15 years? How many times will you have to import these solar panels from China? This low-carbon, low-energy?
Well, I'll pass over to the developer. That's okay.
The exact location, I haven't been told. The chap sitting behind me who's actually going to be building it. But I would have said a lot of the components and the employment and the work that goes into this is actually locally comes locally for in terms of actually the actual work that gets done. I don't know any technology these days that hasn't got some sort of Chinese technology associated with it. What were the other questions? Sorry, Councillor.
I said, what is the lifespan? And I 100% agree with you. Most of these things do come from China, but they don't arrive here on a magic unicorn that brings them over here completely without some carbon impact.
Yeah.
They are arriving on either huge ships or huge planes. There's a carbon impact
Yeah.
on the development, on the building of them. We may be doing our bit. China aren't interested at all. And it won't matter how many of these things we build. We plaster the whole country with solar panels.
Yeah.
It's not going to offset what's going on in China. And I asked the lifespan. So how many times
So at the moment, I've
will
got...
they have to be imported from China?
Okay, the existing panels that I have already on the site already that's been done, which is one of the first ones in the area at Red Lodge, that's been running for about 12 years now. I think you can pretty much expect a 25-year expectancy, possibly longer, it depends. And I think that these days the technology is changing so much, actually the panels are becoming smaller for the same amount of efficiency it is. Can I just go back to the China thing? I want to just say that we have on our farm, on the farm that my colleagues have, we have a solar farm on one side, a solar farm on the other side, another solar farm over there. And I completely agree with you about the context, the amount of solar that's going on at the moment. What I would say is that the impact that that's had and the landscape that's been changed completely, the whole landscape has changed. And what we're trying to do is...
Could we, at the start of this meeting, I did say that could we try and limit things to questions from members and answers from the speakers. It's not an extension of your speaking time.
I'm sorry, Chair.
Have you got any more questions? No? Councillor Akinlawi.
Thank you, Chair. Can you outline your DMS and what you plan to do for your DMS, as well as the aftercare timeline? Can you give an outline of what you plan to do in regards to your DMS? To the DMS, the decommissioning meta statement.
I have to refer to the person behind me.
Sorry, what's...
So basically your DMS in condition 24, 25, it mentions the DMS. Basically, what do you plan to do after the 40 years has lapsed? What's the outline?
I think... Yeah, sorry, in terms of decommissioning, I mean, just going back to Councillor Huffer, obviously, in terms of equipment, across the UK, there's a lot of UK companies that are now producing solar farm panels. So, I think, the idea will be once you get to tendering process, obviously once the application's been approved and the move towards that, they'll be looking at, whoever the best person is to provide the panels. In terms of the decommissioning statement, pass over to...
To be perfect, I can't answer that because I can't remember the... Yeah.
I think, well, at the moment, I don't think we'd thought as far ahead as that, but obviously there will be a plan to remove the panels from the site at the end of the 40 years.
I can I just say is that so on the decommissioning plan is within the option, the lease with the landlords in terms of what's going to happen at that stage, and there will be either an extension of the site, but more than likely it'll be decommissioned afterwards. And then the decommissioning and how that works, I can't give it to you right now, but I can forward it onto whoever needs to have it, because it's all tied into the...
Okay, in regards to a restoration bond, do you have that in place? So basically, let's say in the next 40 years, you're unable to decommission the land. Do you have a bond in place that the council can use?
Yes, there is a bond in place.
And that's been agreed.
All the bond has been the bond, and it's within the old option plan that we have. And there's a full warranty and bond. There's a bond in place to be able to decommission the whole site properly.
Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Can you tell me if you intend to do any ground piling work there at all? Yes, we do.
Sorry. Yes, we do. Yeah, Councillor.
In previous applications, there's been an awful lot of upset in the village about the amount of noise that generates. Would there be any way, if you could agree to your commencing hours to start later and finish earlier in that period?
What hours would you suggest, Councillor? I mean, basically, there is a time limit on there. What is it, between 8 and 5 o'clock?
Yeah, there is one of the planning conditions does stipulate that.
Well, the deliveries are going to be between 7:30 and 6. There's upset over that. People want a sort of 8 o'clock start and a 5 o'clock finish. Would that be acceptable if it was approved?
Sorry, what time?
I think, well, I know they're at 7:30, aren't they, in the morning, which is rather early for a lot of people.
7:30?
Yes.
You're saying you'd like it to start at 7:30?
No,
rather?
later than that.
Later on at 8 o'clock?
Yes, or whatever is acceptable.
Yes, that's acceptable. Also, I would say is that it's not as noisy as the EDF one that was built, because of the southwesterly wind. Actually, it manages to push it away from the village a bit. I think that there was a lot of complaints and noise. I seem to remember when that was built was about three years ago, and that was to do with the the ramming machine in terms of putting in. But they definitely, and the landlords, by the way, they hear all these noises that happen, and they're very much aware of it. They've lived there all their lives, and so they're very aware about the noise, particularly from the battery side, these other noises. But the good thing is that where the site is, the southwesterly wind, generally most of the time won't actually produce as much noise as it would do otherwise if it was further to the west.
If I may, as part of the recommendation in page 73, condition 21, is requiring specifically for piling that the hours are between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. each day, Monday to Friday, and no piling on Saturdays, Sundays or bank holidays. Is that sufficient?
Councillor Edwards, is that a successful answer?
Use your microphone.
Yes, there's been a lot of upset in the village about the commencing of the 7:30 till 6 o'clock operation hours. They would like it sort of start at probably 8 rather than so early.
I think it's probably pushing things too far, because, I mean, people, and particularly a farming community, don't have 10 o'clock as their start, and I would think that activity wants to be, and I believe there's a compromise, or not a compromise, a middle position coming from officers anyway. It's okay. Now we have Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, and I think I know the answer. I'm mystified by the, well, not mystified, this temporary loss of agricultural land. I certainly don't believe it. Do you believe that all solar farms are in 40 years' time going to be decommissioned, because we're not going to need electricity in 40 years? So that's my first point, is I don't think it's a temporary loss of agricultural land. Do you agree with that, or? Because obviously we're in questions here, not debates, so sorry.
It's quite a difficult one to answer, to be honest, Councillor. But of course, you know, there's a 40-year period, and you can't use it for agriculture at the time. You can't use it for the existing agriculture, which is wheat production. But you can use it for agricultural purposes. Are different. What I would say, for example, is that if we have sheep on the farm grazing, which there are two cases of that. One, I put one in with, which is an agrivoltaic, basically in Red Lodge. We have sheep that's been on there for a long time. The gentleman behind me has 400 sheep. You've probably seen the solar farm with his sheep on the 60 megawatt solar farm that was being. He's been running that again for 12 years. And what I would say is that, and it's not, it employs more people than actually wheat production on the land. So it employs people, and it's different agricultural. Of course, it's a different agricultural type. One of the other thoughts, Councillor, is that we have got some land set aside, and if that becomes some sort of intensive farming. So when we went through the study of trying to work out what to do with the land, we looked at pluviculture, other things, working with Whitford. We looked at a lot of different aspects to what can be done, and we do have some retained land near the farm buildings that we could use for intensive purposes. But we've got the Sonica cable route going through, a number of other cable routes going through. Until that's been done, we won't know what to do. But all the farmers got very technically minded, incredibly clever people that come up with quite significant ways of doing things. And we will see how that comes out, but we have got land set aside for that.
Okay, thank you. The second question, really. Obviously, the applications for the 49 megawatts is, and looking at a lot of the applications in and around Burwell, they're all for that amount, presumably to stay within government regulations. And because if there was an application that said we're going to have the whole lot would be solar farms, it would create a rather different aspect than add on. Is that the way it's going? And presumably, the second question, a point of that, is presumably because it's close to the Burwell substation, that's what's attractive to this location.
Yeah, obviously it's being located locally, and if you've seen all the aerials and all the cables routes everywhere, obviously there's an impact of that. But the 49.95, when the initial screening that we did actually included another 20 acres, and we have other acres that we want to include. And it's at the moment we just want to be we were very careful about the battery site. It's actually a battery solar site. We put the battery in first because we were aware about how these things are progressing. And we didn't know, and so the key thing is if you look at the area of the map where the EDF thing, all we're doing is close the box off and smartening up around the edges, because the landscape at the moment isn't really quite as pleasing as it could be, and that's the intention, is to make it as best as it can be. And so it is, as far as it's basically finishing off the job of what EDF hadn't done at the time. So, okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Chair. Part of my question has been answered, but what I'm going to do is just try and press you a little bit further. Looking at the sites around you, I don't believe that they're utilising grazing for sheep. It looks to me as if those fields have been left with the panels in. And what I would like to ask you, would you agree to graze this application for 8 months of the year?
Yeah, just quickly, I think we did obviously visit the site again today, and I'm aware of the solar farm that you're talking about. I know that scheme was approved with a landscaping scheme which hasn't been implemented, so I don't know, that's something for the case officer to look at separately. But in terms of our scheme, because of the significant biodiversity net gain enhancement that we're proposing, that additional landscape...
I'm advised that this is moving away from being a planning matter, and therefore I think that question should just be ignored.
Chair, I would say that we would be able to, in terms of the grazing, we don't have a problem with that. I think 8%, I need to just confirm that with my colleague. But basically, as I said, they've had 400 sheep. Obviously, there are times when they're taken away at certain periods of the year, and then they're put back on the land. That supports the grazing. When you go in the train, and you'll see it in Ely, you'll be able to see the land with the sheep in it.
Has that answered your question, even though it's not? Okay. Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. I noticed on this plan, I don't know if you've got the same one we were handed in at the thing, that there's a sort of a buffer halfway, about 3/4 or 2/3 of the way along. Is there any reason for that? So that there one can see a line of, yes, there where yeah, exactly. That's well done. Thank you very much, Julius. Why is there a? It could be utilised, but it's not. Is there any reason for that?
No, it's a good question, Councillor. You'll see there's another gap as well on that side.
Yes,
there.
I understand that gap.
Yeah, so if you go on site, you'll be able to see the one on the far right-hand side. So that's the overhead lines.
Yeah.
The other one is underground cable.
No, that's overhead lines.
Is that overhead lines as well? So there's a buffer zone that's required by National Grid.
It's an overhead power cable, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
so
thank you very much.
That's why there's those gaps between the panels.
There's one other one as well. So the panels will actually reduce on that side, which is an underground Cambridge County Council, which we supported. They goes a bit further down, but we'll be looking to change the plan at some stage, but that's what it is. It's by law we can't.
And where are the entrances to those properties for vehicle?
So the main, as you can see that Yole's just pointed down there, so the main access to the site will be from Newnham Drove there.
Yeah, and to the other side?
Where you go through the site, there's an access road that goes through there. Yeah.
Right, okay, so that's the access road. Okay. Considering that, I noticed there was a solar panel field or thing to the southwest of that. There, exactly. No, further up a bit more north. No. Southwest, there, somewhere there. Is that part of the same? Is that part of the same structure? These ones, yes.
Yeah, that's all the EDF ones. It's not our structure.
Yeah.
But in the screening, just so you're aware, you can see the gap, the field and the gap, just the southeast of the. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Yoli. There, perfect. That field there was in the screening initially that when we did the screening.
Right.
And it basically, because of the way it's been designed, the idea is that it kind of closes it off, and and the enhancements we're doing around the site will make it
I'm
better.
sort of following up from Councillor Sharp about this because when we have planning designs and it's part of a field and one says, oh, look, this is under 10 houses and there's no affordable housing, and then there's a similar adjacent land as well. Oh, it's under 10 houses. We have to regard that as one big strip. So I'm just saying, is this part of a bigger development or not?
No, it's not, no.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Goldsack.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. You've obviously prepared very well for this, so well done. It's good to see and good to hear. Most of the questions that I was going to ask have actually been answered, you'll be pleased to know. But I've got a couple. Graham, right at the very beginning, did I hear you say that you are part of the National Farmers Union group?
I am, yes. Yeah.
You or all of you?
No, so the PWA planning are owned by the NFU group of companies.
So the planning consultancy to this application is an NFU-owned company?
Yes.
Okay, so not quite a planning matter, Mr Chairman, but I would assume then that you're quite governed by the NFU's guides and guidelines as to how they would want the world to look in 2025 anyway?
No, definitely, yes. I mean, in terms of when we, as a company, deal with any renewable energy schemes, then we have to go through a number of procedures when we're considering the applicant, whether it's a developer or the landowner itself. So if it were, say, a tenant farmer scheme, that's not generally something that we would get involved in. It's only really where you have the landowner and the developer together. So, yeah, if that helps.
The second question, if I may, in relation to the grazing, I know we've gone down that route and one thing and another, will your panels be wide enough apart in their diagonal lines for tractor access? Because I'm assuming they occasionally need washing or whatever, and there's devices. I've seen them on, like, they look like flails, but they're not. They're actually washing devices. So I'm assuming they're there. In which case, could I ask you also, not a planning matter, sorry, but I'm going to get it in, could I ask you also to consider grass and silage use? Because there's a desperate around here for the horse world, and it's costing an absolute fortune at the moment.
The answer is yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is that all the questions to these two gentlemen? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now I've now got on my list neighbour. Does that relate to a person? No? No, okay. Now Parish Council, Reach Parish Council.
Yes, Chair, I have a statement to read out. On behalf
Okay,
of
well
Reach
if you'll
Parish.
read that out now, it'd be lovely.
Reach Parish Council wasn't consulted when the application was originally submitted. Whilst the site of this application sits outside our parish, Reach Parish Council has grave concerns about the cumulative adverse impact of energy developments on Burwell Fen, some of which does fall into our remit. Our concerns, which reference this application and 9 others at various stages in the planning process, are captured in an email exchange between Councillor Acklam and David Moran. The correspondence rests with Mr Moran's email undertaking of 24th of March 2024 to review whether there is scope or political will to create an SPD around this area. Many thanks. Best regards, Mrs Susan Bailey, Clerk to Reach Parish Council.
Thank you very much indeed. And I've got yet another blank space for ward councillor. No? No? Okay. So we now move on. Has officers got anything to say?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. We will now move on to... Your hand's going up and you don't know what we're moving on to. What did you think we were going on to?
Hopefully, questions to the officer.
Correct. So would you like to lead the charge?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see in this excellent report that there are a number of plans that have been secured by condition. What's very difficult to understand is exactly when these plans are actually required to be produced and approved. Now, I'm looking, just as an example, because I think that will help focus the mind. We've already mentioned the... Page 74, condition 24. I was going to come to that, I promise you. Yeah. We've already heard mention on page 74, condition 24, the decommissioning plan. Am I right in understanding that that only needs to be produced not less than 12 months before the expiry of this permission, i.e. in 39 years and so many months from now?
Spot on, correct.
So, just to follow on from that, so well after all of us are, probably most of us, not all, I hope, are no longer here on this earth, these important documents which my colleague here has referred to and asked questions about as being very important in the event that the site does get decommissioned, whether it will, whether it won't be here myself to find out, I hope. No, I don't want to live that long. Just it seems to be very odd that we can put a condition on which requires someone to do something in virtually 40 years' time from now and expect that to actually happen. And we've already heard the concerns of certainly something like the decommissioning plan, and there are a number of other plans that are secured by condition. Hopefully we haven't got to wait 40 years for all of those to be in place. So my question is there a reason why we have to wait 40 years for these sort of plans?
This is a fairly standard approach to this type of report. Long and short of it is we're granting permission here for a lifetime of 40 years. Technology is likely to change over that time. Panels are likely to be potentially refreshed over that time. So until you know what is on that site at the end and what has happened on that site, you're not going to be able to plan for how you're going to decommission or decontaminate or whatever you're going to do at the end of the life cycle of this consent until you get pretty much close to that point. So that is why we obviously have to put in a trigger for the condition. Now we've said here 12 months, you could change that to 24 months if that, but anything sort of going beyond that is probably too much crystal gazing at the time because you're not going to know what is on that site until you get close to the end of the lifetime of the development.
If I may come back on that, Chair, quite agree. 40 years ago, you know, solar panels wasn't even a twinkle in David Attenborough's eye, I'm sure. But 40 years ago. Thank you. It just seems to me that there are some rudimentaries that could be established because, you know, if you're talking about lumps of metal frame bolted to the ground on which solar panels resting, I don't think that that's going to change beyond all recognition, even in 40 years from now. It just surprises me that, now, you know, if a plan based on the existing infrastructure that's installed was created about decommissioning that we were happy with, yeah. And I don't think it would be a particularly complex document to write because it's just the reverse of installing it in the first place. Then surely those plans could, and again, condition could be attached, which would invite the applicant to contact us in the event that the technology changes sufficiently that that plan needs to be altered. And they could come back and they say, okay, we've changed it from a Okey-Cokey 2000 to an XYZ, and as a result, the decommissioning plan needs to change, and here's the new version. Can you approve that, please? Just surprises me that we don't ask for that. Am I being naive?
Naive, no. I'm trying to think of how you would phrase such a condition that it would meet the statutory tests. I think it would be tricky. I don't know if Kevin's got any thoughts on that. My view is if you have a look at the way that the condition is worded, the condition is worded in such a way where it is clear what the expectation is. Because it talks about, within the condition, about obviously removal of buildings, plant equipment, associated infrastructure, and restoration of the site. So there is a clear expectation as to what, as a local authority, we would expect to happen through the decommissioning of a site. It's worded in such a way as well that it says not less than 12 months before the expiry of this permission or the planned cessation. So, for example, if 20 years' time we're all living in space and no longer needing this sort of development, yes, I know I'm being flippant and I apologise, but you'll see where I'm coming from. It still has a trigger point and it still catches. So it's got that sort of catch-all element to it. At the moment, if we asked for a report now, it would be very much future-gazing and just saying, this is what could happen down the line, whereas actually what this condition is actually seeking is exactly how they're going to go about mitigating against either what is on the site or what potential harm or what potential, I don't know, they need to do to bring it back into proper agricultural use going forward.
So just
I personally, as an officer, I'm comfortable that it covers what, as officers, we would be expecting to see. I appreciate that it's a very, very long time in the future, and hopefully I won't be working at that point, but it's 40 years down the road. But you'll see what I'm saying. It's very difficult for us to come up with something now that would potentially satisfy that.
Granted the difficulty, no arguments there. It's just, it seems somewhat perverse to me, second time today I've used that word, that the applicant could change the technology out of all recognition over the next 40 years. And what you're saying is that the reason why we can't get a plan now is because the technology could change over the next 40 years. I don't disagree with that. But the thing is that there's nothing that requires them to come back to the planning authority to say, well, we're going to be changing this site completely, and that would have resulted, had there been a decommissioning plan, to throw it away and then write a new one. But so there is nothing which actually says if you're going to make any significant changes, and again I appreciate significant can be somewhat subjective as a word, that there isn't anything there which requires any sort of control.
David,
and
can I
coming
just
to us.
add, this is an application.
Can you let me interrupt, please? We're on at the moment questions to officers. We've got one more speaker, which is Councillor Trapp, which I intend to let him exercise that. Then I was going to give officers an opportunity, either yourself or the head of planning, to make any statements or explain anything that's been triggered by the conversation today.
Of course, my apologies.
So we now go to Councillor Trapp for the last of the questions to officers.
Oh, yes. Road access. As we travelled there, I noticed the roads that we went across were slightly sort of, following on from the previous item as well, were slightly small. The Burwell councillor might correct me here, but I think there's a lot of traffic in the morning going into Cambridge along that main road. having more vehicles there might be, will create problems. How are we going to look at this road traffic management system, the traffic management system? Is that going to be taken into account?
The only time where there's going to be significant traffic is construction phase,
Yes.
because these units, once they're in place, will need fairly minimal monitoring. There will be, as per the conditions, we will be proposing a camp, so we will be looking at that stage with details coming in. So yes, it will be something that will be considered. Yes, it will be something that we will liaise with highways on once we have the details. But also, I don't think there's likely to be that much significant traffic, because what you'll be having is you'll be having deliveries of the panels, and they'll be stored in the fields, and they'll be put out, and there'll be a limited number of people or vehicles doing that. So that's certainly something that we think that we can manage via appropriate condition or via appropriate report.
We could use the load for transporting the panels to the site.
Yes, the condition that David refers to is condition 10, sorry.
So have you finished, Councillor Trapp?
Yes.
You have plenty of opportunity when we get to the debate section. I have noticed that we have, and I suspect there's no one here to fill it, but ward councillor hasn't been given an opportunity to speak. Okay, well, in which case there's various blank sheet on my sheet, so there's no ward councillor here. So now we go to comments from the officers. Is there anything you want to say that fills in a few gaps?
Well, I just wanted to say previously that this is an application for a full planning permission. So the details of the panels and the layout of the site is approved if members are minded to approve. Any changes to that would have to require new permission. So it would go back to the local planning authority for us to consider it again.
Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to make exactly that point about a new planning permission needed. The other point about this area is that it's very new, obviously, and evolving very quickly. It was hardly heard of 5 years ago. I think it's only within the last 5 years. So there's going to be situations where conditions need to be looked at, and possibly supplemental planning permissions. So the situation with the conditions and also the Section 106 agreement can only be dealt with as things are at the present, but that's subject obviously to changes and new developments. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we now move on to debate. And members, it's up to you now. Councillor Lay.
Considering the location of this site and the panels that are around it, I see no reason for me not to propose that we recommend this proposal for acceptance.
So you're suggesting accepting the proposal as beg your pardon. You're suggesting and proposing that we accept the proposal by the officers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Okay. We'll make a note of that and we'll continue with the debate. And Councillor Horgan.
Yeah, I just have a couple of observations to make. I won't go on again about relying on somebody remembering in 39 and a half years' time that they've got to do a decommissioning plan. I think I've said enough on that particular point. The other point I was going to make was I was going to express my disappointment that when we're talking about, even though it's not an NSIP, still a pretty sizable generation plant. that, that it's not a requirement for one of the statutory consultees, be it National Grid or the DNO, to actually provide some sort of certificate of capacity at the local substation to say, yes, we can handle that. Because if you look at the way that we ask the drainage boards and we look at the local flood authorities and the Anglian Water to say, can we handle the water supply in and out of a development, just seems to me a little bit short-sighted, probably because the list of consultees and what's expected of them has got to catch up with the relatively new phenomenon, although solar panels have been encouraged by this government since the feed-in tariff scheme, which started in 2011, that's 14 years ago, that they don't actually make it a stipulation that the local substation, whoever is responsible for that, has got to provide a certificate to say, yes, we can accept you plugging into us, because I have to get that for the solar panels on my roof, and I'm nowhere near 50 megawatts. And I have to get the local DNO to say, yes, they're happy that, yes, you can plug in and you can discharge the full amount. So it just seems a little bit short-sighted. No reflection on the applicant, on this application. Hopefully maybe someone in government might be watching this on YouTube and think it's a good idea. That was all, Chair.
Councillor Huffer.
Thank you, Chair. I just find this so sad. What has happened to our green and pleasant land? I looked around the acres and acres of solar panels. I thought we lived in the countryside. We seem to be hurtling into some ghastly industrialized version of the country. This drive for net zero is at the cost of our countryside. This is grade 2 and 3 best, most valuable land. By the time this solar farm, which I've no doubt will go ahead, Sonica, Kingsway, East Anglia will be utterly unrecognisable as the breadbasket of this country that it has always been. In 40 years, none of us, there are one or two very young people sitting over the way there, none of us will be here to see what happens next. I take my colleague's point that in 40 years' time, are we saying we're not going to need energy? What we will be doing is we'll be starving, because everything will have been built on, been concreted over, it'll have solar panels on it. I find it utterly, utterly depressing, and I cannot, in any good conscience, support this scheme.
Are you making any proposal? No. Okay, we have Councillor Trapp.
Okay, I can see where Councillor Huff is coming from. I can understand that, and we do have Kingsway on looming, and that is a far less suitable site. Actually, the Kingsway site is on hillside, and it's going upwards, so it will be really seen. This thing is it's good land, but it is really next to the the substation, which can take it, and it will be less visually intrusive than any other solar farm that I know of, because there's already so many there already. It's already sort of spoiled. So I'm actually going to second the motion that Councillor Lay proposed, and suggest that we go ahead with this, because visually it will have less impact on the countryside than any other scheme that I know of. And I think that is something we ought to be making sure that happens. We ought to be not having things on grade 1 land, which some other schemes are, and also visually quite intrusive. This is it's already spoiled, this countryside. And I think we could far rather have it here than somewhere else. Thank you.
Councillor Colbert.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to make the point that I consider it a great shame that our country doesn't make more effort to keep our historic navigable waterways properly navigable. There's a waterway which runs right next to this site, and had it been maintained, it might have been possible to bring in some of the materials to the site by water, which would have removed the necessity for quite so many vehicle movements through the village. That's all, thank you.
Councillor, that load is navigable. I've navigated it, and transport could, if it wanted to, go down there.
Thank you, Chair. I've navigated it too. I thought that probably it wouldn't be sufficiently large or wide or deep. But if that were a possibility,
it's not greatly used.
It would be wonderful.
Well, it is navigable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I can't comment on navigation. My colleagues are better, so they're much superior knowledge. This is a... I'm totally in favour of solar energy in the right place. If I touch on what was said earlier about the solar panels manufactured in China, China are building 43 new coal power stations this year. And we are about 0.16% of the carbon footprint of the world. If I go into statistics as well, which is in the papers, 0.071% soil use, the best land is in this district. But we are, as my colleague says, I think you used the word breadbasket of the country. Obviously, we've got much more prime agricultural land in this county than others. So, as a percentage of the country, that will go up. I mean, I agree with the need for solar power, as I said, but it's got to be in the right place. Temporary loss of agricultural land. I picked on, maybe picked on the wrong word, but I asked those questions because I'm very cynical of the whole thing. I find it absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, this is no criticism of anybody in this room that we have this alleged leasing of land for 40 years when it's all going to be turned back into agricultural land in 40. And I take the point about sheep grazing. You know, that's a very fair, valid comment. So I'm very cynical about this whole thing. That land is lost forever, in my opinion, because we're going to have to generate electricity. Maybe. I mean, in my opinion, we should be looking at putting more solar panels on all buildings. Looking at nuclear. I know a lot of people don't want nuclear, but nuclear is much more efficient. Yes, it's got a massive danger risk to it, but it is more efficient. And then finally, I mean, what we're getting here is it's Burwell becoming the substation of East Anglia almost, because we're going to have Seneca going in there. Kingsway Solar, God forbid if that happens, and you know it's something I'm opposed to. You know, it must be terrible for the residents at the moment. Must be very, very concerned about this. So I can't. You know, it's not necessarily against the applicants, but I can't support this. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. I can't support this application either. Both Councillor Sharp and Councillor Huffer have always mentioned the quality of the land and being the breadbasket of East Anglia. What all these separate applications are doing is turning Burwell, which was a lovely area in the open countryside, into an industrial wasteland looking dreadful, appalling countryside. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colbert.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will just go back to the question of the navigable waterway. Can I just ask the applicant, please, Chair, if they had considered that as a possible method of bringing in materials? Thank you. Had you?
Well, we would have loved to. We would really love that. By the way, you know, where the Thames joins the Severn.
Excuse me, sir. Unfortunately, you're talking not into a microphone. So if this conversation is going to go on for about 4 minutes, would you sit there and turn the microphone on, please?
Yeah. So when you speak to this, what I'm saying is that this project, we're not a Sonica, we're not a Kingsway. I've objected. I tried so hard into saying these projects are ridiculous. The ones in Wiltshire, which is 2,500 acres as well. So all the sort of Pippa Halings, the Liberal Democrat, is in the problem now because they've got this huge project, the Kingsway project, and I don't think it will go through. And by the way, on the grid connection, we have a grid connection. We've had it since 2020, our grid connection. We're ready. As opposed to these big screens, they don't actually have anything ready to plug in. We literally are ready to plug in right now. And we spend a lot of money doing the battery and the solar. And this scheme is literally the boys on the site who own the land, they did not want to do this, but they've been forced to.
Excuse me, if I may. Look,
yeah.
I did say we would try it, and I just thought you must have something bubbling over. So I have quite beyond the normal rules allow you to. I must ask you to sit down now. I realise it strikes passion with many people in both sides.
Chair, thank you very much anyway. At least you gave me the chance.
Councillor Colvert wants to ask one more quick question.
Sorry, can I just ask, please, will you have a look at bringing in the materials by water? Will you please investigate?
I promise you, I will look at it. And having rebuilt a barge in Burwell at Armtrack, where one of the owners has a landmine clearance business around the world. We rebuilt one, and I love barges. I think they're great.
Sir,
we'll have to.
Sir, I'm going to have to bring a close to this conversation. You
So we'll
can,
take
of course,
that as a yes,
rejoin it after the meeting's closed, should you wish to. Councillor Trapp.
You say that sort of rather guardedly. Actually, there's an interesting observation that at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, 1/3 of this land was devoted to energy production, and that was oats for the horses that tilled the land. I understand the thing about this intrusion in the countryside. What this scheme has is that it is so local to Burwell that it will hardly impinge on it. Whereas the other schemes that I, as a district councillor in my ward, have been fighting is something which is basically so far away. The only way is to bring it in by pylons, which are going to actually disfigure the countryside even more than this. So if one is going for a solar farm, this is the right place to put it. And we have to have those. Thank you.
Just before we go on to the final few members, I'd like to say that it's sitting here, it's very easy to understand and appreciate the different points of view that people have. I mean, I would say in something the sort of language I was taught, it's the best of a bad job. There's damage being done to the countryside. These farms look terrible, and obviously we're losing some agricultural land. However, people still want to turn their kettles on, and they still want to heat their houses, and therefore my point of view is when I vote, I'll be looking at it and thinking, well, it's the best of a bad job, which means I will be voting for it, but hardly supporting it. So we'll now move on to Councillor Denny.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of torn on this, really, because I'm sort of veering towards Councillor Huffer, Sharp and Edwards' view. I don't think we've had a full explanation to the sustainability of the panels that Councillor Huffer was talking about. I don't quite understand why it's got to be just for 40 years. Maybe I've missed something. And you know, when you're decommissioning those panels, what happens to the panels? Where do they go? Yes, because we've all, you know, if they're going to be replaced after 20 years, maybe, where do the first lot go? Yeah, then you've got to bring a second lot in. Also, I don't think it's going to, from a customer point of view, I don't think it's going to give us cheaper electricity. So if anybody thinks we're going to get cheaper electricity from this, is an absolute nonsense. So that sort of worries me. And it says, you know, it's a temporary loss. 40 years is quite a long temporary time to lose prime agricultural land. So I am, still quite torn on really the best route. 'Cause I don't think, Councillor Hunt says in the best of a bad lot. I don't think that is necessarily helpful to the discussion of sustainability and moving our electricity and energy strategy forward.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably near the end of the run of this, you'll all be pleased to know. This is tough. This is very, very tough. But I cannot and I will not be two-faced about this. And that is that in my role as also being a county councillor, I was both behind and supported the development of a solar farm at South Angle Farm. And the reason being, it was in the right place, at the right time, with the right technology. And that's all it can be at this moment in time. And I think what we're seeing here today, while I would say I have endless sympathy to the position taken by councillors, friends of mine to the left of here, regrettably, because of what's happened before with what we saw today at the EDF site, it was an EDF site next door, wasn't it? Yeah, because of what we've seen there and the proximity to the power thing, I'm finding that I'm leaning towards accepting this and accepting the officer's recommendation to approve, because I think solar has got a part to play in this, whatever one's beliefs on net zero. I do kind of squaff a little bit when we get the figures at 220% bionet grain in. Tell me what it means. You know, it's just great. We come out with all these labels and words. 220% of biodiversity net gain. I can't see many deer being able to get through fences to get across that land like they used to. But there is a role for solar, and I think solar, next to a solar field, adjacent to a power plant where you've already got access, and I will go back over this, Graham, and it might be something just to note, I take some solace from the fact that you have represented a company today that's come from the National Farmers Union. That gave me some degree of a comfort feeling, so well done to the guys for employing you on this, and well done for you for supporting it. So it will get my support to go with the right officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm Councillor Huffer.
Can I be really cheeky, Chair, and have a second bite?
Please.
I sat in a planning meeting, I can't think it was back, it might have been last year, about another planning application in Burwell for housing. And it was described, the officer's recommendation said it was adequate. And I objected to that phrase, saying it's adequate. And your phrase, it's the best of a bad lot. We shouldn't be yearning or striving for the best of a bad situation. For our residents, we need the best situation, the best housing, the best solutions. We should not be settling for anything less than what is right for the residents of Burwell, and for the livestock, and for everything, the environment that lives in Burwell. Just because several solar farms have sprouted up in Burwell doesn't mean to say that we have to plaster another however many acres of the best and most valuable land with yet more solar panels. We have to strive for better. Not the best of a bad job, not adequate. That's not what we were elected to do. We were elected to do absolutely the best thing by our residents. And I, in all conscience, don't think yet more solar panels, however prettily they're done, however much camouflage you put around them, as Councillor Goldsack says, dear, don't recognise that. So I will still, in spite of everything that's been said, I cannot support this scheme.
That's what's called democracy, Councillor, and I think we've all, there's no easy answer to this. We've all struggled with it, and so far I've had a proposal to go with it, which has been seconded, and unfortunately, would go back to my statement and say it is the best, but it's the best of a bad lot. And I stick with that. So we had, Councillor Denny, you've got another debate item.
Yeah, can I just say one more thing? I think we're talking about 40 years. I mean, I think the way technology is evolving, we're probably going to, you know, in 10 years' time, we'll be thinking, God, why on earth did we think of solar panels? You know, we're talking about nuclear, reactor things that are, you know, possibly going to come on stream as well. There's tidal stuff they're talking about. There's a lot more options potentially out there. And we're just, I think maybe we're being a little bit, dare I say it, short term.
You're absolutely right to say it. You're absolutely right to put it forward. But I would go back and say that people are going to want a cup of tea this afternoon, and they're not going to get nuclear power today. So, members, this is your last chance in the debate section. Yes, you look like you're ready to put your finger in the air. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just to respond to the comment that was made a moment ago, I enjoyed working for an outfit called the Carbon Trust for 5 years, and that's probably going back at least 20 years ago. And we talked and looked and supported wave generation, tidal generation, all sorts of different things. And the technology is as advanced today as it was 20 years ago, i.e. getting nowhere. Yeah, there's new Pescovite solar panels that are slightly more efficient in terms of its conversion of sunlight to electricity. And yes, with any new technology, there is an additional cost associated with those panels compared to some of the more traditional existing ones. Will technology change? I hope so. Because if it doesn't, well, I think we might be in a bit of a hole. But I wouldn't like to make any sort of decision today on something that might happen in 40 years' time, and I'm not making a quick jibe at relying on somebody removing 40 years from now to actually get a decommissioning plan together. That was all, Chair.
Okay, I think we've finished our debate now, so I think we're going to a vote. As it stands, we have one proposal. I'm now being given
proposed by Councillor Lay.
Yes, I've got that down. Thank you very much. So we have a proposal from Councillor Lay that we accept the officer's recommendation, and that's been seconded by Councillor Trapp. So will all those in favour of that proposal please raise their hands?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Chair. 6 votes in favour.
Those against please raise their hands.
1, 2, 3, 4 votes.
And will those who are abstaining please raise their hands?
1.
So that motion is carried, and the officer's recommendation has been accepted. Now, we've got a little bit more business to do, but if I suggest we break for just 5 minutes now, and those of you who would like to leave, leave. Those of you who would like to stay, please stay. We have Kevin. You're going to present your case, and this is item number 7, and hopefully you'll be close to the microphone, if you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
This is item 7 for the confirmation of tree preservation order E0225 for the preservation of one tree of heaven on the Paradise Recreation Ground at Deacons Lane in Ely. There was a map showing the general area of the tree, which you'll be familiar with from the site visit. The overhead with it being marked. And this is the map from the preservation order with as T1, the black circle. As pointed out earlier, the additional black circle on the property up here is a mark on the mapping system. It's not anything that we have any control about. The proposal is to confirm the preservation order without any modifications. This is from the site visit. This is the tree slightly earlier in the year when it was in leaf. Saying the tree is healthy and in good condition. So the considerations for the committee to consider are that the amenity value of the tree, although amenity is a slightly subjective thing, the tree is clearly visible to members of the public and from the park and from the footpath and highway. There's also the opinion of the neighbour who has objected to the confirmation of the TPO, and a current lack of evidence supporting the removal of the tree in relation to the claimed property damage on the opposite side of the road. There are possible cost implications to to ECDC if this tree is retained, but that would only come in if any other actions were refused later with applications to remove the tree. The amenity value of the tree, its impact and loss in the local landscape. go through. So, there we go. The main considerations, we've covered all of those. So it is. So the amenity value of the tree was done using the tempo assessment, a copy of which was in the thing, a copy of the tempo assessment was in the report. The tree scored a 15, which put it as the defensible category. It was only just out of the definitely merits TPO. So the opinions of the owner, the owner of the tree is the ECDC Parks. They objected to the removal of the tree due to the lack of supporting information when the Section 211 notification was made. One objection has been upheld against the TPO, which was the neighbour, and he's the same person, and he used the same justifications for supporting the removal of the tree in the previous one. The City of Ely Council were happy to support the tree officer's opinion as part of the Section 211 and offered no further comment. So the main points in the objection were that the tree is a non-native species and is included in the Schedule 9 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and that they spread underground via root suckers. They can cause skin irritation to humans and pets. They are poor for biodiversity due to their release of gross inhibiting compounds into the soil, which prevents germination of other plants. It's called allopathy. The suckers damage pavements, drains, drainage systems and building foundations. Now, the tree was on site prior to August 2019 when that species of tree was added to the list, and the DEFRA says that if the tree was already there and it's being kept, they don't foresee any further action other than stopping it spreading into the wild. With the tree being located in the centre of Ely, it would be rather difficult for it to spread into the wild. The spread of tree roots by suckers is a common means of vegetative propagation, and that's managed on site. I spoke to the trees team earlier today, and they've got plans to remove the suckers that were visible on site within the next week or so. The skin irritation is caused by contact with the sap of the tree when it's fresh. This is only going to happen if the tree's been wounded. With the scale of the tree, the only wounds are going to be in the upper canopy, likely as a result of any tree surgery. There's been no reports of any humans or animals being affected by this tree or any of the other trees in the area. The allopathy, which is the release of the growth inhibiting chemicals, is used by elder, sycamore, walnut, horse chestnut, ash trees, and various others. It's quite common, and in a location in an open space, a tree that stops other trees growing is not necessarily a bad thing. The other part is that trees have a potential all trees have potential to cause damage to roots and roads, paths, drains or properties, but there's been no evidence to support that in this case. The footpath is undamaged, there's no indication of damage to the road. The claimed property damage didn't include any evidence supporting that this tree was directly at fault. This species of tree is regarded as a low water demand species, which puts it in the lowest category for the risk of causing damage to a property. But the trees either side of it are in the moderate, so they actually pose a higher risk to property than the one that's been suggested by the application for remove. So the tree is a prominent feature of the area, and it's in good health, and it offers a significant visual contribution to the amenity of the local landscape. It forms part of that avenue feature along the side of the public open space. helps with the screening and of noise from the park. Now, members are recommended to approve the confirmation of the preservation order due to it being a prominent feature visible from the public realm in good health, and it offers a significant visual contribution to the amenity of the local area and as part of Ely. And there's currently insufficient evidence to link it to the subsidence case. Should that change, then the retention of the tree would be reassessed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I've got down here blanks, and I'll just go through the list in case there's a speaker here, but I don't think there is. Objectors, applicants, neighbour, parish council or ward councillor. Is anyone here to speak for those? Oh, in which case we will bypass the speakers list, and the officer has just made a proposal, so I think we will go on to questions to the officer. And is this a question to the officer? Yes, okay, Councillor Horgan, away you go.
Just one question. Has the objector, their insurance company, their legal representative or the arboricultural specialist provided any evidence whatsoever that the tree has caused damage?
The objector is not the person who lives at the property that's claimed the subsidence. That person initially made a objection to the TPO, which they withdrew once I explained how there wasn't the sufficient evidence. The insurance company submitted evidence as part of the Section 211 notification, and it didn't provide any level monitoring or results of any trial pits where tree roots had been done, because none had been dug. It was purely based on the fact that that was the nearest tree to the property.
Can I summarise that answer as no, they haven't provided any evidence? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to, let's say in the future it is discovered that via evidence that the tree does provide is the cause of the damage to the applicant's house. It mentions here that if there's any significant loss and the applicant spends more than £500 to be compensated, what is the realistic compensation that the council will provide to the applicant?
Compensation would only occur if they came in to apply to remove the tree, and we refused it, and we would then have to provide compensation for any damage that occurred after that date.
Do you have a figure in mind?
It could be up to could be into 100,000, depending on what works and what's needed. So it's unclear at the present time. But at the moment, there's no evidence provided. We haven't refused an application to remove the tree. We served the TPO. So we.
Thank you.
Councillor Trapp.
Kevin, the sum of 15 is the sum of the 5 conditions A to E, is it? Because actually I add that up to be 17, not 15, as on this piece of paper, pages 83 and 84.
The tempo assessment?
Yes, 83 and 84. 5 plus 2 plus 4 is 11, plus 1 is 12, and 5 on the other side make it 17.
Yep, my maths has
unless
failed
you're
again.
using a duodecimal system.
My maths has failed again.
What?
You're just testing this.
It's a duodecimal system you're using rather than the decimal system, I presume. No, duodecimal. Hexadecimal is base 16, and in that case, this would be 15.
Planning meeting.
And I assumed, Councillor Trapp, you'd retired as a mathematics expert.
One is never retired from mathematics. It is the lifeblood of any individual.
Well, I'll leave you with your lifeblood, and we'll move on to Councillor Goldsack.
turn your mic off, please. I'm going to follow on, if I can, Kevin, from Councillor Akinwale, which is, I was unsure of this when I read the report. I then called you to have a discussion about it, and that really put it clear in my mind. And I don't think that's come across either in the document or in what in your reply. So I'm going to try and ask you a question to make it very easy. If we accept the TPO, the tree preservation order on this particular tree, and Sedgwick invest their money to find a root mass that's caused a subsidence issue on the house measured by measuring cracks and whatever the movement, that does not mean that we will never remove the tree. If it's proven that this tree is at fault, we will remove the tree. Will we remove the tree? That's my question. And therefore not be responsible for any compensation to said property.
Yeah, that's correct.
Just to cover all the bases, Councillor Trapp, have you got anything else you want to contribute?
I think my contribution has been rather major so far.
Very good.
We have, I don't think there's, Councillor Huffer, we've moved to debate. Well, then we'll go back to questions to officer.
Brief question, Kevin. This letter of objection, am I right in thinking that he has now withdrawn his objection, or is this the objection from the man who lives up the road?
This is the objection from the neighbouring property. It's not the person who's claimed the subsidence.
I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. Seems clear-cut to me.
Happy to second, Chair.
It was my intention to second. I don't really mind which of us.
There was a reference to Littleport in the officer's report, and that did confuse me, but when I investigated, I found out that, of course, it was Ely. Thank you. We're now going to move on. Now moving on to item 8. And the author is David?
No, it's Yole's presenting this one.
Lowly, okay, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you don't get tired of me today. Agenda item 8 was originally reported by my colleague, Holly Durrant. I'm presenting the sum of her report, which I, of course, agree with. This is in the context of processes related to nationally significant infrastructure projects and SIPs, processes and regulations that we don't control directly, and we normally act as statutory consultees, as host authorities, until a decision is made, after which we may act as planning authority for some of the requirements. I will go through that in a bit more detail. The issue that officers have in hand is that sometimes, or most of the times perhaps, it is difficult to meet the deadlines, which are normally shorter than the planning deadlines that we normally have as in a Town and Country Planning Act application, the ones that we dealt today, for example. It would be difficult for us to report every single response to government in each of the projects in time to meet the deadlines for planning committee. Just as a quick overview, you will be aware that we have pre-application stages, pre-examination and examination stages until a decision is made over an NSIP project, and post-decision, which are normally similar to discharge of conditions and planning obligations in other planning applications that we usually deal with. In this process, the local planning authority, like East Cambridgeshire, do have involvement in all stages, most of them responding to the planning inspectorate, which usually acts as the examining authority for the specific Secretary of State who received the application. They are very complex documents. They are of usually great volume of information, and usually also reviewed by different parts and teams within the district council until we reach a draft response for each of these stages. On the post decisions, for NSIPs, East Cambridgeshire may be the planning authority to discharge or to approve or not a requirement which is similar to a condition in a TCPA permission. Until a decision is made, so we're talking pre-decision here, pre-application and acceptance stages, as well as pre-examination and examination stages. Some of the deadlines are highlighted, which are usually half of the time that we normally have, just roughly speaking. Some of them, for example, during examination, which tends to be the longest period within the whole process until a decision is made, we normally have usually a matter of weeks to send our response, a formal response, to the planning inspectorate. Following a consent, if given, to determine a requirement, in case East Cambridgeshire is the local authority determining it, we can consent, agree or approve, and even add conditions to that if we see fit, and refuse, of course, and request further information. As with normal planning applications, they can, the applicant can appeal if we disagree with a requirement submission. And there is a period for that, which is 42 days. And possible appeal costs as well, as would be applied to a TCPA application as well. More importantly, for us, if we are acting as local planning authority, we would have 56 days, 8 weeks to determine the application. If we fail to determine within that period, it's deemed approved. If further information is required, if we see fit, we need to require within 14 business days, and we must consult within 5 business days of receipt of the information. These timescales are shorter than the usual ones we normally have for a condition, including perhaps except for the overall 56 days. You will appreciate that the level of information is greater and the complexity as well, so we usually need to internally have discussions about the submitted information. So apologies, this is a bit wordy, but in summary, the recommendation is that we keep a communication with members in any situation. However, if we can't follow the usual path to bring to a planning committee decision, that we have delegated authority to the strategic planning and development management manager and the director of operations to submit responses to any part of the NCIP process on behalf of the district council. We are also recommending that there is a delegated authority to determine requirements as part of the DCO process post-decision, so projects that have been consented already. Noting that where the delegated powers are used, the draft responses will be sent to local members and members of the planning committee ahead of submission, and there is a sharing of information before that with the chair and vice chair of the planning committee and the leaders of all political groups on occasions where there's no time to report for planning committee, both on A, when we're talking about responses, and on B, when we're talking about deciding for requirements information, or whether to approve or refuse. D is just a request that you note Appendix 1 as full details of the King Solar farm that is mentioned on the report. And finally, the item E is that delegate authorities given to the Director, Legal and Monitoring Officer to make the necessary changes to the Council's constitution on this regard. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. This again is one of these items where we don't have a sort of full hand of people asking questions and things. So I think it's probably sensible to go to asking the officer questions if you've got them, and we have one already.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify exactly which NSIP submissions and DCO requirements will be delegated, and what are the red lines that must come to committee?
Sorry, Chair.
Are you?
Yes, sorry. I wasn't sure we had more questions, but on page 100, paragraph 5.8, I think is a bit more detailed. So for all currently pending NCIPs, which means all the nationally important projects not yet consented, we are suggesting that key documents are shared with the planning committee, local members, director of operations, and all leaders of political groups. For those as well, the responses will have the endorsement of the planning committee as wherever possible. However, any final responses prepared by officers would be circulated to the planning committee in case the usual procedure is not met. For the same NCIPs not consented yet, we will, where there is time, we would ask to host member briefings on topic-specific meetings. And for discharge of requirements, post-decision, we would circulate to members of the planning committee, local members, director of operations, and the leaders of all political groups, any decisions issued by the council for their information in that case. So I think in summary, the idea is always to bring to the planning committee for a decision, even if it's a draft response to the planning inspectorate, or determine about a requirement / condition. When not possible, then we would apply the delegated procedure.
Thank you.
We have Councillor Trapp.
Yes, I'm trying to beat the 5 o'clock deadline that other people. Page 100E, delegate authority to Director Legal for the. I thought the council's constitution can only be changed by full council.
We've had legal advice on this from the Director Legal, and the advice that we got back was that for matters such as this, which is a small tweak, effectively, to the Constitution, where the Constitution is unfortunately silent at present, but it can be done under the powers which she has vested with her. Clearly, I'm no lawyer, so I can only go with the advice that I'm given, but that is why it has been brought in front of yourselves as members of the planning committee at this stage, rather than taken to full council. And we did seek advice on that. If I may bring you to page 93 of the report, Councillor Trapp, where the recommendation, which is what you are effectively considering today with the report, at both times, on both A and B, it says clearly where there is not enough time for a report to be delivered to Planning Committee. Unfortunately, with these types of applications, the deadlines are set in stone. We have no control. We can't ask an extension of time. We have recently, some members in this room will be aware that Kingsway is a similar example where the deadlines just didn't marry up. We had to use emergency powers, which we're able to do under the Constitution. What we are trying to do by this is come with a sensible compromise where we can, we will bring them in front of members, because as officers, we want to have the cover of members when we are dealing with these responses, because we are responding on behalf of the council. You as members are the council. But sometimes there's going to be times where it just doesn't work, where some of these we have 28 days. You'll note on some of the requirements when we're dealing with effectively the conditions, we have 14 days to ask for more information. We need to be concentrating on, in the nicest possible way, we need to be concentrating early on the information that we've got in, trying to assess that as quickly as we can to try and work out if there is problems or anything like that. Clearly what we will do, and I hope members are reassured because we have been doing this recently, is we will make sure that we communicate with both the leader of the opposition and any relevant members who may have had involvement in it as early as possible we can within the process. We are not in any way, shape or form here in trying to slip anything for the back door or take any powers away from committee. It's purely to give us an administrative route to be able to respond to things in a timely manner with the correct safeguards in place to make sure that local members and the elected members' views and the views of the council are properly taken into account. I hope that's clarified it. Thank you.
Councillor Huffer.
Thank you, Chair. I might be being confused here. On page 100, 5.8, you do mention that you will be speaking to local members, but that's not in the recommendation I see in A and B here, unless I'm completely daft, which is possible. And I just wondered that, as a local member who's been involved with Seneca for 5 years and knows it inside out, as is my fellow ward member, that maybe we ought to be thinking of involving the local members who may or may not have knowledge that would be useful as a matter of routine in this delegated powers situation, rather than just the leaders who may not be aware of what is going on the ground, so to speak. It's my first point. My second point is, knowing what is coming up with that Seneca application, do we have the resource, does the planning department have the resources it needs? I know Yole is doing a wonderful job, but if we are going to be having these 56-day and potentially 14-day turnaround periods, has the planning department got the resources it needs, or do we as a council need to give you more resources to deal with things like Seneca? Because we cannot put our residents' lives in danger just because we haven't got the staffing that is needed to deal with these monstrous, enormously wordy documents that they're going to flood you with and say you've got 2 weeks to make a decision.
To answer your first question, I draw your attention to point C underneath your recommendation on page 93, and it's also covered on the page before on 99 when we're talking about the recommendations, where it says, note that where delegated powers are used, draft responses will be sent to local members and members of a planning committee ahead of submission. So we are tying in and committing to that approach. So that is there. With regards to resourcing, clearly, obviously, that's probably a matter for a different forum and a different committee. What I would say is at present, with the extended use of PPAs for our larger schemes, we are certainly with Kingsway, for example, we have agreed a PPA with them, so we have got some resourcing in place. We're in a better position probably than we ever have been. Will that be sufficient? Only time will tell. All I can say is we will try to be as flexible as we can do, and if we need to have more resource added, we will cross that bridge when we come to it, and we will obviously let members know if we need to have those conversations. But at present, I don't envisage it to be an immediate need.
I'm just aware that when they do a paper dump on you, or a dump, it's going to be huge and give you 14 days in which to respond, and I've no doubt they will bury all the tiny little things that we really ought to be querying in amongst a load of old dross, knowing Seneca as I do.
The good news on that is that we are meeting, as members will be aware from a newsletter which we put out recently, members will be aware that we are meeting as a group of local authorities who are dealing with Seneca, but also we are meeting frequently with Seneca themselves. We have a reasonable idea of what the likely timescales are for them to come in. So whilst they have not entered into a PPA, and I don't believe they possibly will, we do have enough knowledge to know roughly what the timings are going to be, so we can gear ourselves up so that we know when these things are likely to hit. As I said, I can't probably say too much more than that in a public forum, but I hope that's reassuring.
No, the comments I'd like to make about Seneca probably aren't best minuted in a public meeting either.
Okay, and Mr. Councillor Goldsack.
Mr. Councillor Goldsack, thank you very much. Yole, I am in complete agreement with Councillor Huffer on this, and I would still like to see an amendment to B, and let me explain the reason why. Recommendation B does not include local member. You're going to send a local member what you've answered. I think local members in NSIPs have more information than any of the other people above, and I think they could help you draft the local the local response, rather than go back and edit it late in the process when you're going to be short of time. So that's my recommendation, that we amend B to also include the local members involved with the NSIP, not wait until you've done your draft response and then copy that out to the local member.
Can I respectfully suggest then, Councillor Goldsack, that we change A as well, because A and B are pretty much
I would agree. I would agree. Sorry, I didn't make that clear. I would totally agree.
I would have thought that point is covered by C, so only a draft response, and at that point, once it's been drafted, the local members can actually make changes and suggest changes, and I thought that was actually covered by that. Well, this is...
to react, so that the sooner the local member sees what has got to be responded to, the quicker they can get the information that they have on the ground. But bear in mind the fact that with Seneca, we had a group of 20 people who became experts over the 5 years. They knew more about this kind of thing than, with all due respect to Yole, that you know, they were treated by Seneca like country bumpkins, and they simply aren't. They are learned, and they have learnt and learnt and learnt and learnt, and they would be a huge source of information for people like Yole and David to help get the responses in. They are sitting there even now, every day, working on this, trying to keep their communities safe.
But the key to that way round, you're absolutely right, but the key to that way round is the access to those people isn't direct from Yole, it's through the local members that are involved.
I think there's a combination of 5.7 on page 99 and 5.8 that we need some clarity on. So the recommendation is 5.7, and I reiterate the what Councillor was mentioning, that C suggests that after a draft is prepared, that's shared ahead of submission with local members. That is in parallel with 5.8, the first bullet point is saying key documents and updates on the project will be provided to members of the planning committee, local members, etc. So as soon as we receive documents, we'll email them. This is what we arrived. In-house, we'll be preparing the draft response, possibly in consultation with technical colleagues. So we have a first review of those technical documents to go back to local members and others for a before submission. That's obviously just in case we can't bring it to planning committee, but I think local members are involved since the beginning. What I think my colleague was trying to suggest is that there is time for in-house. We round up a bit more the response first and then share it, but obviously with the risk that there'll be amendments from local members as well. It doesn't stop any local member when receiving the first email saying these documents have arrived, we have a response due this date, and this is the stage in the process, for example, that they come back and say we have concerns or points to raise regarding this X, Y, Z. And we'll be taking that into account, certainly.
I just think that this, having spent 5 years of my life.
I'm sure you have more experience than I do.
You know, it feels very personal to us. It feels really personal to the people, to Mark and Kelly and myself. It feels really personal to us. And as it will do with Kingsway, with you, it'll feel really personal to you. And you know, I cannot tell you how many hours you will spend working on this.
Won't be personal, but it'll be representative of what I hear from the parish councils around me.
We were actively working with parish councils, as you will find you will be doing.
I'm going to stop the meeting for about 60 seconds or 120 seconds while I talk to the planning manager, if I may. So we just stay where you are, but we've... We're back in. So we're back in a live situation. I'm personally quite content that there's sufficient maturity and experience and political nous for the officers to consult local members, and I'm also share with them a worry that we may put sort of extra bureaucracy on them, and it may just slow various things down as time goes on. So my view is that I would accept the proposal, recommendation as it is in front of us. But of course, David is more than willing to continue to answer questions if you've got them. So do we have any questions for David? Well, in which case we'll go to a vote. And from the chair, I would suggest that we accept and we delegate the authority to the Strategic Planning and Development Management Manager, and we delegate the authority to the Strategic Planning and Development Management Manager, and we note that where delegated powers are used, draft responses will be sent to local members and the members of the Planning Committee ahead of submission. Yes?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Pardon? You're seconded.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, so we have it proposed and second, and we'll now go to a vote. Are those in favour of the proposal as I've just said?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favour.
Thank you, Chair. If I can draw members' attention to page 121 of the agenda, so agenda item 9, which is planning performance for September 25. In the usual fashion, I ask members to note, please, the detail in front of yourselves, and if you have any specific questions on that report, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, David, just a comment really on the appeal references. The decision level down the left, the DEL and the COM, I've taken that's delegated or committee. I see the lexicon down the bottom. But would it be possible for future meetings to put some projected dates on there? Because it doesn't really tell us what's going on. It tells us that there's 5 of them, five that are up for appeal, but it doesn't give us any indication as to what, where, when and how.
The problem with appeals, if I'm honest with you, is that we don't often know what those dates are. So once we've got a start letter for an appeal, the next thing we're likely to get, and that could be a week down the line, it could be a year and a half down the line, is when the inspector is going to visit the site. The only time we will get dates, and you'll note them on here, is for when we have a hearing or a public inquiry, which is the date that the actual meeting or inquiry will be had. With regards to any appeal at written representations, your guess is as good as mine as to what the dates are. I wish I could be more certain on that, but we are completely in the hands of PINS as to timings, and we just don't have that information.
The table below shows when the upcoming hearing dates.
Yeah. So most of the ones you've got above there, in that table above, will be written representations appeals, so that is appeals that are dealt with purely in written format. So what will happen is we'll get, with the start date, we'll have a date where we have to prepare our statement for, which is usually 6 weeks after the appeal comes in. And then after that, we'll be in the dark until we get given a site visit date. And then what normally happens is the inspector are normally targeted on getting a decision out within 6 weeks of them doing a site visit. So we don't have exact dates. We can have sort of rough estimates, but when it comes to appeals at the moment, I'll use an example of enforcement. Enforcement appeals can take anything from 3 or 4 months to 2 to 3 years.
I think if I come at it from another way, and thank you for that, I do understand your position on it, but if you take the first appeal on that, which is in my village and Councillor Huffer's thing, there is a lot of angst in that village about that application. And as the local representatives, I get asked weekly, I won't say daily, but weekly, where are we at? Have you heard anything? What's going on? And to be able to say, no, we're in the dark, doesn't help. If we could, so what I'm suggesting here is, there aren't that many that go through to appeal. Maybe it's actually not dissimilar to what I just said earlier. If we could keep the local members updated on any data that comes through, I think that would be a very useful exercise. I don't know how other local members feel on that, but I think that would be a valuable exercise.
I'm more than happy to have a conversation internally to see if there's ways of getting yourselves useful information on that. I'll get back to you.
Very happy with that, David. Very happy.
We'll talk about next month, and we'll in a second, Councillor. We'll talk about next month, and David will make investigations and report back with particular emphasis on you.
On me, thank you.
Is that a hand up in the air?
It's the hand up in the air, yes.
Well, then, then the authority has come down from a higher place to allow you to speak.
Okay, now I'm delighted that in the comparison of enforcement complaints plan, there's 3 enforcement plans already there, which is reports that the development is not being built in accordance with approved plans. We've had some problems with this in the past in the planning department, in the planning thing, and I'm delighted that we're actually enforcing plans that have to be, the planning application has to be done. So I'm delighted that that's happening.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Trabb, what you've got in front of you there is the number of complaints that have come in rather than actions that have been taken.
Right, okay.
When we move to part 2, clearly we can talk about actions that may or may not have been taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to going into closed session. And are we all in favour? If you are, will you raise your hands that we're going to go into closed section?
Yeah.
Yep.